The first service we attended together smelled like old wood and winter coats. A choir rose, and your hand found mine under the program. If you're here for navigating religious differences in relationships, you already know how one doorway can feel like both a welcome and a test. The question is how to walk through it together without losing yourselves. Afterward, we stood on the steps where the air bit a little, and your breath came out like tiny clouds. I asked what a gesture meant, and you told me gently, the way someone translates a poem. Later that month, I brought you to my family's holiday gathering, where the prayers are short and the food is the sermon. You watched, listened, and helped pass the bread like you had been doing it for years. We talk about moments like this on Whispered Hearts. English, because love gets real where culture touches ritual. Faith is not just a belief in a book. It is a language of time, food, and touch. It is the way people greet the morning and forgive the evening. But there's something even quieter that many couples miss at first. Faith often names our belonging long before we can name it ourselves. It tells us where to stand, how to say thank you, and which stories explain the world. What if the first step is not agreement, but understanding what the stories do in your life? Research shows that when couples name meaning, conflict cools. Therapists report that asking why before how opens the door to trust. We tried that at the kitchen table with tea cooling between us. This practice makes me feel connected to my grandparents. This word helps me slow down. We stopped debating and started describing. Our curiosity found a rhythm. We practiced the difference between observing and participating. You taught me that sometimes the kindest choice is to watch with respect. I taught you that sometimes the most respectful choice is to join a small part, even if the words feel new in your mouth. Have you noticed how your body relaxes when pressure becomes invitation? Here's the curiosity that flipped our fear into design. What if the point is not to match beliefs, but to share reverence? Reverence can be gratitude over soup, a candle lit in quiet, or a sunrise walk where no one speaks. Which small moment in your week already feels sacred, even if you never called it that? We built a practice we could live inside. On Sundays, we named one thing we were thankful for from each other's tradition. On Wednesdays, we took a walk after dinner and let silence do some of the talking. On holidays, we chose one featured tradition from your side and one from mine. The house became multilingual in the language of awe. The first time I knelt and didn't know when to rise, you squeezed my arm once. That touch steadied me more than a paragraph could have. The first time you tasted a dish we only bring out on a certain day, I told you the story behind the spices. Story turned ceremony into home. What story from your childhood still lights up your face when you tell it? But there's a moment many couples meet in the second chapter. Family opinions arrive, and they often arrive loud. One aunt worries you will forget who you are. One cousin treats curiosity like betrayal. We learned to honor concern without giving it the steering wheel. Thank you for loving us enough to ask. Here's what we are choosing, and here's why. Faith holds identity the way porches hold summer evenings. There is room for guests, laughter, and quiet. We tried to ask better questions. What does your faith protect in you? What does mine protect in me? Where do those protections overlap? Where do they conflict when the calendar gets crowded? Public worship felt different than private practice. In sacred spaces, we followed the house rules. At home, we made a space that belonged to both of us. A shelf with a small plant, a bowl for written hopes, a book from each tradition, and a candle we lit before hard conversations. Home became a daily service where kindness wore the robes. Have you noticed how many arguments shrink when you name the stakes? Not, "You never want to come with me?" but "I feel alone at the place where I learned how to hope." Not, "Your family doesn't get me," but "I fear being laughed at when I try." The right stakes invite gentleness. Gentleness makes room for new tries. We designed our first major holiday season like a blended playlist. 2 songs we play loud, several we hum softly, 1 we leave for next year. We told relatives our plan before the invitations went out. It sounded simple. It was brave. Planning turns pressure into rhythm. But there's something even more important than the calendar: repair. One spring morning we argued about a festival we couldn't both attend. Words stacked on words, and the room felt small. We paused, reset our tone, and put the repair steps on the counter like a recipe. Safety. Same team. Empathy. You're afraid we'll drift from your people. I'm afraid you'll resent mine. Action. We'll each choose one non-negotiable day. Then we'll schedule a make-up celebration for the one we miss. Repair is faith translated into practice. The benefits of a blended upbringing started to show up in ordinary rooms. Your niece asked a question only a child would dare, and you answered with a story that held both our worlds. My dad watched you lead grace in your own style and nodded like he had been waiting his whole life to hear that word. This is what shared reverence does. It multiplies the places where love can breathe. We learned our no's and wrote them with respect. There are rituals we will witness but not perform. There are prayers we will say together and others we will hold for each other in silence. Consent makes participation meaningful. Without it, sacred becomes performative, and even good words lose their warmth. Here's a retention check for your own home. Have you noticed which spaces feel safe for faith talk and which ones spark defensiveness? What would it look like to move the hard conversations to a softer place, like a walk along the neighborhood park or a drive where you both face forward and the world rolls by at a kind speed? We found a useful rhythm for introductions. Before bringing the other into a new space, we exchanged a simple briefing: what to expect, what to avoid, where to sit, and how to signal, "I'm not comfortable." Those tiny notes became body armor made of kindness. We weren't performing. We were learning how to be good guests. Identity shimmered brighter when we stopped treating it like a court case. Some days you felt more anchored to your childhood prayers. Some days I felt more anchored to my grandmother's table. We stopped demanding symmetry. We pursued honesty. That honesty allowed us to delight in each other's seasons without feeling abandoned. But there's a quieter gift we almost missed. Shared values hidden in different words: hospitality, compassion, courage, humility, justice. We wrote them on the fridge with a dry erase marker and circled one each month. Then we practiced it out loud. March is for hospitality. The practice was small. The house felt bigger. One summer evening, we sat on the stoop with iced tea and let the heat loosen our sentences. You told me how your faith steadies your breath when life runs. I told you how mine makes gratitude feel like a person who keeps showing up at the door. We listened for the common river beneath our different streams. It sounded like kindness with shoes on. When misunderstandings happened in sacred spaces, we used short scripts to reset. I don't know what to do here. Can you guide me? It's okay to sit beside me and rest. Thank you for trying this with me. Short scripts are like ushers that help us find seats when the room is full and our nerves are louder than the choir. We also created consent cues for touch and participation. A hand squeeze meant with you. A thumb trace meant watching. A gentle head tilt meant step outside with me. We practiced at home until we could use the cues without making a scene. Communication let reverence stay spacious. Seasons became teachers. In autumn, we walked past porches lined with pumpkins and discussed how each tradition marks harvest and gratitude. In winter, we leaned into the quiet and read to each other by lamplight, choosing passages that calmed the room rather than inflamed debate. In spring, we visited a community garden where neighbors from many faiths traded seeds and stories. In summer, we hosted a small, respectful dinner where friends spoke about what hope looks like in their families. Midway through the year, we added a practice that changed the air in our home. Right to pass. When a topic felt too raw, either of us could pause it without penalty. We would circle back at a set time. Trust grew because choice was present. Choice makes curiosity safe enough to return. Whispered hearts. English is here for these gentle structures, a place where you can admit that reverence and discomfort can share a seat for a while. A place where belonging is not measured by volume, but by how carefully we carry what someone else calls holy. If you have felt alone in this work, you are not. There is space for you here. Children, present or future, bring the next layer of questions. We decided to teach stories from both sides without asking our kid to be a courtroom. We let them ask the unpolished questions. We answered with warmth first and clarity next. We promised each other not to scare them into reverence. Awe grows better when it is invited, not forced. Schools and communities can help when you give them a chance. We introduced ourselves to a librarian who loves pluralism and donated a picture book that reflects our home. We told a teacher about our holidays early, so tests wouldn't collide with sacred days. We offered to share a simple tradition in class without turning it into a spectacle. Good allies appear when you bring tools, not just requests. We addressed the quiet fear that we might drift apart if faith stayed different. The antidote was not sameness, it was rhythm. Weekly check-ins, a shared practice of gratitude, seasonal service together, like a food pantry shift once a quarter. Love can hold many words when the hands are busy doing the same work. But there's a point where boundaries and bridges meet. Conversion pressure makes intimacy brittle. We agreed to protect each other from campaigns, even well-intentioned ones. We learned to say, I love that this matters to you. I'm not changing my path, and I won't ask you to change yours. Let's keep learning how to walk kindly together. Conflict still visited. One Sunday we snapped over a question that had followed us for months. Where will we spend the morning on our overlapping holidays? We used the same repair: safety, empathy, action. Then we added a fourth piece: gratitude for the try. Thank you for coming with me last week, even when you were unsure. Gratitude softened the next try before it existed. We kept a questions for later note on our phones. Hard questions thrive when time is kind. We wrote them down as they came and scheduled a cup of coffee on the porch to consider them. A breeze and a quiet street helped us trade ideas without trading kindness for speed. Sometimes we needed a mediator, a friend who knew both traditions and loved us more than their own arguments. We asked them to listen, not to judge. We left with one practice to test and a promise to report back. Asking for help is not a lack of faith. It is faith in community. Have you noticed how music makes room when words are too sharp? We built a shared playlist of songs that felt sacred without requiring agreement. We played it while cooking, commuting, and folding laundry. Holiness can arrive softly through a speaker and remind you that kitchens are altars too. We promised to never ridicule each other's practices, even in private. Humor has a place. Contempt does not. We guarded how we spoke about leaders and communities in front of each other. Respect kept our house feeling wide instead of thin. Our calendar began to look like a woven fabric. Your days, my days, and our days. We hosted a small gathering in late summer where friends brought a dish that carried a family story. A neighbor told us how their grandmother blessed bread before slicing. A co-worker taught a greeting that sounded like a morning breeze. The table became an atlas. On a crisp winter night, we attended your service again. I still missed cues. You still met my eyes at the right moments. We walked home under a sky that looked like it had been dusted with sugar. We didn't talk much. Sometimes love is quiet because trust is doing the talking. The next morning, we made pancakes with nutmeg the way my uncle taught me. You made tea the way your aunt taught you, warming the pot first, then pouring like it mattered. We ate with gratitude and didn't try to decide who was more right. Right felt too small a word for what was happening at that table. We kept asking each other the questions that kept curiosity alive. Which word in my tradition sounds warmest to your ears? Which practice in yours might I enjoy if I knew the story first? What would it look like to build a shared ritual that is honest to both of us, like a monthly gratitude walk, or an evening candle for friends who need care? Families learned to meet us where we stood. We brought elders into our home's rhythms so they could see respect in action. A grandparent watched us bless a meal with 2 short lines. They cried, then laughed at the surprise of their own tears. Sometimes people need to see the bridge to believe it holds. We also learned to honor our limits with love. There are rooms where we still do not belong. There are nights when we stay home because the mix would stretch us past kindness. Boundaries protect the possibility of future bridges. Without them, everything becomes a cliff. Now a last retention question for you. What's one tradition from your partner's faith that inspires you? Share it in the comments so someone else can carry your courage into their next hard room. As we close, remember how ordinary acts carry sacred weight. A hand on a shoulder during a service you do not yet understand. A whispered translation offered without pride. A shared sink full of dishes after a holiday where everyone ate too much and went home smiling. This is how reverence looks when it chooses a home. We're grateful you're here. Whispered hearts. English exists to remind couples that difference does not have to mean distance. Belonging can be a long table with many candles, each flame respectful of the others. Your house can glow like that. Tonight, write 1 sentence to say before your next hard talk. Keep it simple. I want to understand what this means to you. Put it on the fridge or in your phone. Then choose 1 small shared practice for the week. A walk, a song, a candle, a call to someone who loved you first. Tomorrow, send a message to the elder who worries most. Tell them how you will keep the story alive. Mean it. Keep it. Then bring your partner a cup of something warm and name 1 thing you loved about their courage today. When the year turns, celebrate what you built. You learned to sit in rooms that once felt like mazes. You learned to honor what feeds your soul and what feeds theirs. You learned to use the words both and like bridges. That is the patient, hopeful work of navigating religious differences in relationships, and you are doing it with care.